During this video, we're going to work with a free online application called Photopea. Photopea is similar to Photoshop, and it's browser-based, so it'll work on a PC, a Mac, or a Chromebook. We're just going to do a basic overview of how Photopea works and create a project while we do it. I hope you enjoy this. So to get started with Photopea, go to photopea.com and the interface will pop up. It is browser based, so it will work on a PC, a Mac, or a Chromebook, or most devices. So how this is set up, it's set up very similar to Photoshop, and the tools work very, very similarly. On the left-hand side are all of the tools at your availability, and just know that underneath those tools, when I click on a tool and hold, there are other tools under that subset. So keep that in mind while you're working. On the lower right hand side over here are the layers that you'll be working with, and I'll be demonstrating that. There's history up here, so it basically records the steps that you take to build your projects. Swatches to select color. Along this little panel here, these are extensions, so I can click on perhaps say this gallery, and I can choose from stock photographs that maybe I want to use for my project. This PAR is paragraph, working with documents that you would be setting up, and character, you can mess around with fonts, so on and so forth. So also up top here are some drop downs, and we'll be going over some of those today too. We'll take a look at filters and how those are used. So that's just a general overview of kind of where things are that you have to work with in Photopea. Now to get started, you can do a number of things. We can either click New Project here, open a project from our computer. Let's say we're halfway done with one, we save to the desktop or in Documents, we can open it from here. We can choose from some free templates, and we'll take a look at those here in just a second. And then there's a couple of demonstration documents that go along with this little Learn button here at the top. So you can click About, and it'll tell you about Photopea. You can click this little Learn button up here, and it will open up a new page, and there are a bunch of different topics here that if you want to get a little bit more in depth with how some of these tools work and how Photopea is oriented, you can learn that way. There's also tutorials, so I can click on tutorials here, and there are some tutorials that will basically take you step by step through how to do specific projects, and you can learn that way. So let me go ahead and click out of this, and let's go back to our little start page here. So we can either go up to File and New, or we can click this New Project button here, and this little pop-up will show up. So at the top, you can name your project, you can set the dimensions here, or you can go down here and you can select a pre-selected format for either social media, if you want to make an Instagram post or Facebook post. Print sizes are here. The most common is this 8.5 by 11 letter. Photo sizes for typical photos that you would print for photo frames. For different screens, and then there's a mobile button for ads, and then a 2-inch with different resolution as well. So some other things about this this template here, right here at the top, it's listed as templates, and you can select templates, pre-made templates with symbols, or you can uncheck that so that it's only with photos. Or I can go back and I can uncheck photos, and it will just have the vector images in it. So in this case, let's go ahead and click with photos, and we can actually do a search for a topic that we might be interested in, and we can type that in. So let's say painting is my topic. I can hit enter, and then any one of these little templates that have to do with painting will show up, and I can choose from those templates. So I'll go ahead and click this one, and it will load directly into your viewport. Now notice that this is set up with layers. We talked about layers and where the layers were here a couple seconds ago. So this is the background, this is the actual photograph, and then there's a strip that they have included so that you can see the text a little bit better. And then there's a couple of text layers here that they've used to put some text in. And you can select any one of these layers independently, and using this move tool up here at the top, you could move these things around in space in your image. So that's kind of how layers work. You have to be clicked on the layer that you're working with, and note that there are these little eyeballs over here. We can turn these off if we're working with a document that has a bunch of layers and we start to get confused on what's what. We can turn those on and off. So let's go ahead and I'm going to click out of this template and not save it. And let's create a new project, and I'll go ahead and walk you through a quick project to get started so that you can acclimate yourself with Photopea and some of its functions. So I'm going to click New Project, and I'll name this one Example. And in this case, I'm going to go down to 8.5 by 11, this letter size. And when I double-click Letter and hit Create, Photopea will give me a document that's 8.5 by 11 to work with. Now, for this project, I'm going to walk you through this, and we're not going to cover all of the tools over here. We'll be exploring those in other tutorials. But just to get started, we're going to go over here to these extensions, and we're going to click this button that says Gallery, and we're going to get a background image. So for this project, let's just say you're going to pick an image that has some type of an interest, so that perhaps somebody could get to know you better. So under keywords, I typed painting, and I can scroll down through these images and select an image that I think looks interesting to use to set things up. Now I'm going to select a photo. Let me go ahead and pick this this photograph with brushes. And when I click that, it loads, in this case, on a separate layer. So I can work with that image independently on that layer. I'm just going to go ahead and hold Shift on my keyboard, and I'm going to stretch this image out, because notice it doesn't fit my 8.5 by 11 format. Now I can stretch it out so that it's filling up the picture plane if I want, or I can leave it a little bit smaller and I could center it up on the page. But depending on the image that you pick and that you drop down, there's either going to be one layer for a photograph. It may or may not match the 8.5 by 11, or there could be multiple layers for text or fill layers. But in this case, let's just go ahead and use this image as a demonstration. I'm going to hit Enter on my keyboard, or actually check up here at the top, and now it's basically placed that background image. So I selected the image that I wanted to use, I clicked on it, it showed up as a layer. I went up to stretch it out, it had a bounding box on it, and I just basically moved it into place so that it would fill up the picture plane. So I've got this background layer, my photo layer, and now let's do a couple other things. Let's add a filter to this. So let's say that I want to change the background look of this this photograph. I can go up here into these tools here, and these are some selection tools. There's a rectangular select and ellipse select. I'm just going to go ahead and grab this rectangle selection tool to get started, and I'm going to drag across an area that I want to change the look of my photograph with. And notice when I move that selection, it showed me where the center line was as I moved over top of it. So as you move up and down, it'll give you a center line, that red one, and in this case it gave me a gray one for the lateral line. So I have my selection, it's centered up, and I'm going to go up here to Filter, and we're going to apply a filter to just that area. I have this little area selected here, and I'm going to apply a filter to it. Now in order to apply that filter, I'm going to have to rasterize this layer. So notice this little icon down here in this this little layer panel here. That says that basically this is a vector or it's a shape, that layer that I brought in. So I'm going to go up to Layer, and I'm going to go down to Rasterize, and when I click Rasterize, it will turn this shape, this layer, into basically a bunch of little pixels, so I can adjust those. So with my marquee tool selected, I'll select an area that I'm going to change, and I'm going to move it around to find the center points horizontally and vertically, and let go. Now I have the middle of the picture plane selected, and let's go ahead and apply that filter. So if you go up to the drop down where it says Filter and click Filter Gallery, you'll get to see a preview of some different adjustments that we can make to our image. So when I click that, we had glowing edges selected in the filter panel. But you can click down through these and see what those things look like in real time. So I'll go ahead and click paint daubs, and it takes just a second. It takes just a second to apply it. Now let me go ahead and zoom out. I'll zoom out on my scroll wheel here so that I can see the entire adjustment that I'm making. I can pan this, by the way, with that little hand to move it left and right as well when it's in full screen. But I'll go ahead and zoom out with that scroll ball, and then I can take the size of the paint daubs and I can adjust those, and I can change the sharpness as well. And there's a couple of brush types down here that I can drop this little simple menu down, and I can adjust what the brush types look like with this specific filter. So let's say I want to use this dark rough one. I can click that, and if you wait just a few seconds, you'll get to see a preview of what that adjustment looks like. Be patient while you're working with a browser-based application like this. It may take a little while for the adjustments to show up. So I'm going to drop this down again. I'll hit spatter, take a look at that and see how that looks. And I can adjust that as well. Or I can go back and I can select any one of these adjustments. So in this case, let me go ahead and go back to paint daubs. I'll change the size by bumping it up. Or I can highlight where it says size, and I can type in a paintbrush size. Now let's say that I like the look of this. It's been simplified a little bit and looks different than the rest of the image. I can click OK. And that adjustment or that change that the filter made is applied to the image that I'm working with. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the marquee tool again, click on my image to deselect that area, and then let's go ahead and add some type to it. Now in this case, we're going to use this tool down here, this type tool. When I click that and then click on an area in my image where I want to start working, you'll see a little cursor show up, and I can go ahead and start typing. But notice how small that that text will be when I start typing. So we'll go ahead and type our name, and it's showing up really, really small here. So I can adjust the size of that by selecting the text or just going directly up to where it says size in this little drop down. And I can use this little bar to make the size of the font larger or smaller, and I can see that in real time as it adjusts. So let me get this highlighted, and I'll bump up the text size. And that's 150 point font right now. But I can go back in here and I can type in a larger number. So I'll type in 300, hit enter on my keyboard. Oh, that's a good point. You have to highlight your text and then go in and type in 300 or whatever size you want to work with. Hit enter, and that will make the adjustment. Remember to have your text highlighted. So I'm going to move my text toward the middle of my picture plane. So I found the center line, and I'll drag it down and find the midpoint. Now I have a text layer here. I have my photograph and the background, which we'll just ignore and we can discard that later. So since my text layer is black, I'm going to go ahead and highlight the black color, and I'm going to go up to this little palette here at the top, and I'm going to click it, and I'm going to select white. So you can change the color of your font up here. I'll click OK, and now when I click on my image or my check mark, the font has changed to white. So now that I have my font changed to white, I'm going to go ahead and add one more layer to this this image by clicking this little panel down here, or this little button that says new layer, and I'm going to drag that down here underneath my text layer. And the reason I did that is I'm going to darken this picture a little bit by using a fill layer. So over here on the left hand side where you see the gradient tool, there's a tool called the paint bucket tool underneath it. I'm going to click it, and with black selected, I'm going to click on my viewport and I'm going to apply that paint to this layer. And notice when I did that, I can still see the text, but with that layer opacity all the way up to 100%, it blocks out the background. So now I can just drag this little button down or type in 25% or whatever adjustment that I want to use for that darkening down of that background. So in this case, I can see the letters really well this way. Let's go ahead and leave it at 25%. And we have a pretty good hierarchy set up here for our image. One last thing that we can add, that I like to add, are some effects. So right down here underneath your layers panel are some layer styles. So if I click that EFF, there's a bunch of different things that I can apply to the text or whatever layer I have selected. So let's go ahead and explore another way to find this. With the text layer selected, I'm going to go ahead and double click it just to the right, and that will bring up the layer style panel as well. So in this case, I'm just going to add a stroke around the outside of my lettering. So I can click this little box here that says stroke, and then I can click right next to where it says stroke, and I can go down and I can change that color type. So if I want to use black or a blue, I can apply that color to it. I'll click OK. Let's say that I like that look. And then I can change the position of it, the size of it, and there's a bunch of different adjustments that I can make. Now I noticed when I made the size of that stroke layer larger, I have a font right next to the Y in Berkey. I think it's an extra Y that I added on accident, so I can show you how to go back and make adjustments or corrections as well. So I'm just going to leave that stroke checked, and I'm going to turn the size of it down so it's not so obvious. And there are a bunch of other blending options that you could apply if you wanted a different color overlay or something like that. A gradient overlay so that it goes from light to dark or dark to light. You can adjust that. There are patterns in here that we could add as well. Outer and inner glows, and there's also a drop shadow here, which is kind of cool. So when I click drop shadow and click the word drop shadow, I can make adjustments to it. So I can make it larger and spread it out. I can add distance to it, and you can see down in the preview that shadow's being pushed away from the lettering, so that it looks like it's hovering above there. So again, there's a bunch of adjustments that you can make, and if you're good with them, click OK. So let's go back, and I need to delete this text layer on top here. I'm not using it, so I can just click this little trash can here, the delete layer trash can, and then I can go back, select text, hover over where I want to make my adjustment, and when I click, it's selected that little area. I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard to delete that extra Y. So a couple of examples of troubleshooting. We worked with layers here. We can just ignore the background, and then we can save this document to have it printed out, or just save it as a PSD if we want to keep working with it. So when you're done, or if you're not done totally with the image and you want to keep working on it, I would suggest going to File and Save as PSD. That's a Photoshop document. You could drop it into Photoshop and work with it, or go ahead and re-upload it anytime you want to keep working with it. So I'm going to save it as a PSD, and either drag it into my downloads or drag it to the desktop to save it.